CSS, but there's, what is that?
Alright,
They do that, they compile style sheets now, right?
I'll get to it.
Okay.
So today we're gonna do about have a talk about SASS. So is anyone here for the first time? I know my voice is kind of.
Is anyone here for the first time?
Thank you.
I got you.
No, everyone's been here before. Awesome. So we're gonna talk a little bit about SASS. This is an introduction to SASS. So we're gonna keep the scope kind of small. Who's heard of SASS before? Okay, so it's not software as a service or whatever.
Oh,
It's
for that, yeah.
It's like a CSS, CSS preprocessor, and it's also kind of like a programming language that you could write in, and it gets compiled into CSS so that your browser could understand it, interpret it, and render the styling for that web page. Yes. So, what have you guys heard about SASS? What have you heard? I know I saw some hands up. Yeah.
I haven't used it yet, but I heard it adds the WebKit for you. It compiles the CSS and adds the WebKit for the cross browser.
I don't know about that because whenever I used it, like I always had to like add it, but I would add it as a mixin. Because it's like a lot of things need that WebKit functionality, right? So I like a mixin. I'll explain it later. It's just a way to use that code.
I just know that you can make like variables and things that you can use throughout the code.
Yeah.
The process over to the code to the CSS.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
not all.
Oh, yeah.
Very little.
Oh, it's enough. It's a good start. Anyone else? Cool. All right. Okay, so SASS is a CSS preprocessor. So it converts SASS into plain CSS that the browser can interpret. Because when you write SASS and then you hope that the browser can interpret it, it won't. It just gets confused and you get errors. So SASS is also a styling language that gets compiled to CSS. It gives you the capacity to use variables, nested rules, mixins, logic statements, and other abilities to write CSS. It helps keep large style sheets well organized, easier to break apart and standardize, which you will see in the next couple of slides. And you will see the term SASS be used for SCSS and SASS. So they're used interchangeably, but they're pretty different. So for example, what we're going to be talking about is SCSS, but I'm just going to use the term SASS because everyone else uses the term SASS. What's different between SCSS and SASS is one of the things is that SCSS uses braces and what's it called, the semicolons to organize its code, whereas SASS is more like Python, where it needs indentations and new lines so that its code could be interpreted. So those are two. You'll see the SCSS used more often. I use it at my work, but I mean they're both called SASS. Okay, so I'll start to begin using SASS. So SASS can be implemented in many different ways. So you can use Webpack, Ruby, or Node. And for today's talk, I'll be using Node because that's the one I'm most familiar with. Okay. So I'm gonna create a project folder and call it. Can you guys see that? Yes? No?
No.
Okay.
I can see that you have a box on your screen.
I can see that you have 4 pictures of yourself on your desktop.
Yeah.
That's not narcissistic at all.
It's different crop angles. Come on, Ed.
You know you do that best.
Oh no, I have a folder on mine. It's all
It's filled.
Let's call it SASS. SASS. Presentation. So I'm making a project folder called SASS Presentation. index.html, and then I am going to create. Okay, I'll do that here. Okay, cool. So I created an index.html and a package.json. And then, let's see. I'm gonna install, since I'm using Node, I'm gonna install something called Node SASS. And that allows me to use SASS in my project. So I'm gonna install it as a dev dependency. Are you guys familiar with the term dev dependency? Yes? Any questions about that? Alright, cool. Once it gets done. Cool. Having my node modules. So since I'm using Node SASS, I'm gonna write a script for it. And it's this, I'll just type it out first and then I'll explain what it is. Okay, so what this does is it tells Node SASS to watch the SASS folder, which I haven't created yet, and then output any SASS right here into a folder called CSS. I haven't created either of those. I just wanted to explain what the script does. So the next thing I will do is create the SASS folder. And then I'll make the CSS folder. And then, alright, and then I'm gonna add content in my index.html. Let me save my package.json. And then on this, you guys are familiar with adding style sheets to, okay, cool, HTML, okay. So it's gonna be, I'm telling it to look for a main.css. I haven't created that yet, or it hasn't been compiled yet. And because I'm calling this main.css, in my SASS folder, I have to create a main.scss. So yes. And file main.scss or main.sass. Cool. So now I'm gonna run my SASS script. So I'm gonna type in npm run SASS, which is this script right here. So it's gonna tell Node SASS to watch the SASS folder, any changes in the SASS folder, and output it into the CSS folder. So any questions so far? I'm going kind of fast, but
What? Sorry.
yes.
Oh, I'm just curious. So, this, what's monitor? Oh, Node. The
Node
backend
SASS.
Node is so it's
Correct.
that's what's monitoring this. too.
Yes, this is
Watching-
what's gonna
okay,
monitor.
gotcha.
Exactly. Good question. So I'm typing npm run SASS, which is this script right here. So then, cool. So then how do we know this is working? So right now there's nothing in my CSS folder, but the way I could check it is, wait, I am going to open my index.html, and right now there's nothing because I haven't put anything in there. So in my main.scss, I'm gonna create the body tag and give it a background color of red. save it, and notice that it detects some changes and says rendering complete. Save it into my CSS file. So if I go to my CSS folder, I have my main.css. So when I refresh it here, my background is red. Any questions on any of that?
Yeah.
Yes.
You mentioned the syntax difference between CSS and this, that it could use braces and stuff?
Oh, SCSS and SASS.
Right, so
Yeah.
you're doing SCSS here?
Yeah.
And so syntax-wise different from just plain vanilla CSS.
Yes.
You don't use the brackets and the braces and everything, and the semicolons and whatnot?
Oh, and whenever you use SCSS, you do use braces. It's more closer to akin to CSS.
Oh,
So
I see.
that's why I guess a lot of people use it, because they're more related rather than using SASS.
Well, that's why I was wondering what's the difference
Yeah.
between just a regular CSS.
Oh, there's
file.
not. I haven't seen much difference.
Well, so then
Syntax-wise.
the follow-up question on that is then what's the advantage of using this over CSS?
Well, in CSS, its functionality is not as broad as
You can't use
SCSS.
variables.
You could do variables in both CSS and SCSS, but in addition to variables in SCSS, you can use like control flow, mix-ins, like all this other stuff. Yeah.
Well,
And oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I'm just you can keep telling me. I'm curious why. Would the reason that you would still use just a vanilla CSS over this be that you didn't, by using regular CSS, you don't have to have a backend running to compile it?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
one of the advantages of it. As far as I know. Yes.
You don't need a backend to compile it. You can have the actual editor that you're working on. You have a plugin, they can do it for you.
Oh, yeah.
Well, sure, but if your server's out there running or whatever to serve that out, you still have that.
It compiles it out to CSS.
Oh.
Yeah.
So the file you're still serving the client is CSS.
Yes.
Well, so
Yeah.
The
then,
benefit of this is that you can keep your code running, because you can reuse a lot of the little partials that are going to be used for CSS.
and you can't do that as well with CSS.
No.
Okay. Roger
Yeah,
that.
exactly. There's also plugins that do that.
Yeah.
That convert your SASS into CSS. So those good points.
Since we very long CSS.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in addition, I don't know how how much browsers like IE Edge. I don't know if they or do you know if they're Johan, do you know if how well CSS3 is implemented into like IE Edge? Because I know
the latest browsers have support for it.
the latest
Yeah.
IE Edge too.
But
As
maybe
far
not
as-
really
yeah.
old ones?
As far as IE, I don't even know what that is.
Good for you.
Because one of the things I was reading about SASS is that it fits in with all like browsers because it's able to convert whatever's in its file into like plain CSS, whereas CSS3 uses the variables, and that's not supported by like all. That's
Right.
the last thing that I read. Like, not all browsers.
Right.
Cool. What was I? Oh, okay, so, alright, so now that we got our SASS working, I'm gonna start talking about, let's go back to the slides. Well, that. So, I'll be talking about variables next. So, in SASS, variables are denoted with a $sign. So, in that way, it's similar to jQuery, if you're familiar with jQuery. They also have scope, and so they have global scope and local scope, which I'll be talking about.
Or Perl if you're really old.
I'm sorry?
Or Perl if you're really old. The variables denoted by the $sign, that's a
Oh,
Perl.
Perl is a programming language? And they
Perl?
have- Oh, Perl. I heard plural. Sorry, my head's a bit.
Well, it's
Perl.
almost dead, so I forgive you for that.
Okay, and it allows us, with variables, it allows us to reuse values and consolidate these values at one location. So, let's do that. Let's create a SASS variable. So then, we denote it by using a $sign, and let's call this like color. And let's set this color to red. So right here, in our background color, instead of typing out red, we can use color. So when we save this and go back, right here, it's still red. And if we change this color from red to blue, why does it look, oh, it looks purple on my screen. Okay, so it's blue. Cool. So, as I said before, there's something with SASS where variables have global scope and local scope. So right now, this variable has global scope because any of these selectors could access this variable. But let's say I create another variable. Let's call it gen. And let's call this let's give it a red color.
Perfect. Jen definitely brings SASS to mind.
So then, if I do this, that's expected to be what color? Red. Good. So that's gonna be red. But let me do div. Paragraph. And then we go here, and I'm gonna make the text. I'm gonna call it gen. Right. So what do you think the text of the paragraph is gonna be? What color?
It wouldn't know.
Oh, what'd you say?
It wouldn't know.
How? Why?
Because it's local. Isn't it local within the body?
Yes, good. See, that's why I get this error.
Nice.
But let's say I want it.
Good point for
Hey. Gold star. All right. So let's say I wanted this blue. What could I write here?
Blue.
I could, yeah, that's true. But if I wanted to use a variable,
It'd be color.
Color.
color. Awesome. So then no errors. Awesome. And if I refresh this, I get blue text.
Nice.
Let me zoom that. I get blue text. Awesome. Cool. If I wanted to make this global, this gen variable global, where should I put it?
Above body.
Awesome. So then, if you guys are familiar with any other programming language, this should be familiar.
Curious
Yes.
if it is top to bottom or if it's truly just outside of scope. Meaning, if you put gen below the curly brace under body, but then still use gen in there, would it still recognize it as global?
So you're saying move it right here?
Yeah.
Good question. Oh, it's still gonna error because I guess gen hasn't been defined yet.
Defined, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
uh-huh.
it's
I usually follow.
top to bottom, yeah.
I usually follow like good practices, so I'm used to like putting it on top there.
No,
And
it's
so-
like
You're asking me to be a bad coder, man.
It's really good to know.
in a real language
Yeah.
that would totally work fine. Just say it.
No, it's really good to know the limits of like any technology. So this is
This
good.
is true, but I ran into that with Python recently.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to use something and I was like, it's right there.
It's right
but
there.
it was lower in the code.
Oh.
And I was used to having.
Oh.
So
Good
it's
calling, good
so
calling.
it's sequential.
Yeah, it looks like it's sequential.
Yeah. So okay.
Yeah, so it's like I guess like a program, like where it reads
Yeah.
from top
Yeah.
to bottom.
Like Python sequential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something I don't know what it is.
Okay, so we understood global scope and we understood global scope for SASS variables. All right, any questions about that? Go ahead. Anything you guys want to try?
So what if you have gen in the red and you put another gen inside the body that
Oh
it's
yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about.
So what do you do?
Okay, good question. That's the other thing I wanted to talk about. So let's say I make this purple. What do you think is gonna happen?
Purple.
It'd be purple.
Purple? Why do you think that?
Because wouldn't the local scope override the
I
global?
would think it would take priority.
Yeah.
Both answers are valid, and you get purple. Good, good. I was thinking about that this morning. It's like I'm talking about like variable rewriting, and yeah, good. You remind. Thanks, guys. Okay, cool. All right, cool. So that's the basics of variables. And so the next thing I want to get into is nesting. So nesting. SASS uses braces and semicolons, while SCSS uses braces and semicolons, while SASS uses indentations and new lines, as I explained before. And it's similar to how JavaScript differs from Python. JavaScript uses braces and semicolons, whereas Python's more indentations and new lines. And it's a way to keep our CSS encapsulated, organized, and readable. By encapsulated, I mean that, so you have, let's say this is a component, right? Let's call it and you know how there's a component, but then there's other items within that component? Let's say there's like a button, but then there's a button title. That's so. Let me go to class. So then let's say this would be like component title, right? So whatever changes I make, whatever CSS I add to component title, it's gonna remain within the component itself, and it won't leak out to, like, let's say I have a secondary component right here. It won't affect that component, so it keeps it encapsulated. It keeps it the way you want it.
So instead of chaining a component title this way, you nest it in?
Yeah.
But to access that, you'd have to do component space component title, right?
Component space component. No, I don't think so. No. What you mean component?
Well, to access component title,
Yeah.
like say you're doing your JS and you want to access component title, how would you get to that piece?
Using.
I don't know. Say you wanted to change something in component title with your JS.
That might be your HTML or your React.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, if you want
Where
to
you're
access.
like where you're setting the class.
Oh, okay. I mean,
Would you need to put component title?
component.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I'm wondering. So like if you let's say you have something a different color in there or something, I don't know, whatever, but you
Yeah.
wanted to change that or manipulate it or whatever, like you know.
Let's say component. I need an example. Component. Let's say this is component text. So you're saying if I wanted to access like component text, and I know in JavaScript you could just do like a query selector to get this.
So, well, what I'm curious about, so there's you had class component text, right, which
Yeah.
is inside of component.
Yeah.
So does that mean you have to be inside some markup of component to access component title?
Oh, in SASS? No, you could also have it.
It's the specificity, right?
Yeah.
You're saying that, so it's that specificity change.
You could have
You're
it.
saying like on this component with this or this class name, so, but it's just nested instead of
Yeah. So
spread.
yeah. So like she was saying, it increases your specificity when it's nested.
So you don't have to keep repeating component title, component,
Yeah.
component text, component. You just put it all under component.
Yeah. You could have it outside if you want, or you could have it nested inside. Let's see. Yeah, let me check the specificity. It's supposed to increase this. So this is specificity. But okay, so this is nested. So I'm actually gonna add some SASS right now. So let me use this variable. Actually, delete this. Color. Let's make it color.
You need to change your class name to text instead of title.
Yeah. Thank you. So then we go right here, and then we background. So I'm just affecting the background of that div element, and that color is red. Okay. So that's a little bit about encapsulated. And then SASS also uses the ampersand, which is the and sign, to create associations between selectors. So does everyone know what a selector is in CSS? Yeah? Any questions about that? No? Okay, cool. So we're gonna use something called the ampersand. Yeah.
Variables and selectors.
Hmm?
So using variables to select these.
Oh, I can't hear you.
I can't hear you and I'm right next to you. Speak up,
No.
brother.
Sorry.
We all wanna
So
hear.
when you use variables, in place of selectors, you can do that.
Oh yeah, you can use select. Yeah, you could. All right, I'm gonna show that an example of that actually. I'm gonna first show an example of using an ampersand. So when you have something like this, right? This ampersand is like a representation of the component, the parent component. So this is like saying component text. So if you hover over this, you can see it's component text. So when I save this and I go to my document and refresh, what do you think is gonna change? Nothing, right? Right? So because this ampersand is a representation of the global component. So if I have, what's really handy about the ampersand is you could do, like, you can use it over and over. It's like a variable, but it's a variable that represents the global, not the global, but the parent class or the parent selector. So I get to do some text, more text, and color. So go right here. So go right here. My color is green. So this is a really handy tool for this is a really handy symbol for not always repeating component all the time. Alright, so another thing you could do is you could set a variable, let's say a block. You could set it to the ampersand. So let's say you need something like components, because I know Luis gave a talk on Bootstrap last week, and I know Bootstrap has like selectors where it goes like button and then button like large, something like that, to represent that they want a button, but they want a large button, and need both classes to indicate that you want a button but a large button. So you get to do that with this. So you have block right here that represents the parent selector. So more text, right? So I get to do, what's that? This, I have to interpolate the, block. And then I get to do this. So this block represents the component class. And then this, I guess I could do this again. So then, like this. Color is green. Guess I can't do that. No. Okay, yeah. So if I have something like component, so this is the main component, and if this component is inside, what's up?
Don't
Sorry,
worry.
talk to me. So, let's do component large. Cool. So then, there's a trick I wanted to show you guys to remember. Well, anyways, you can use this. You could set your parent selector as a variable by assigning a variable to the ampersand, and that way you could have it so that it repeats. I wanna see if I can do this. Why did it turn blue? It's not detecting this. Huh. I don't know why it's not working for me now, but you could assign a variable. I said before, you could assign a variable to the ampersand if you wanted to. All right. The next thing I want to talk about, partials. So partials are a way to structure your code. They're separate files that contain SASS code. So partial files start with an underscore and use the import to import partial files into other files. So I'm gonna create a partial here. And since we're using variables, I'm gonna create a partial called variables. And I'm gonna move my variables into here. So now, this doesn't have access to any of the variables, so I get an error, right? So I have to import it. So I need the @ sign and import, and then specify what file I get import. So notice, so does anyone see the difference between this? Oh, we have it. This and this, right?
The underscore?
The underscore and the ending. The suffix. So now, when I go back here, I get the same thing as before. So no error. So with this, it gives me a lot of power because whenever I need to use variables, I don't have to put it all in different files. I could have them all in one file, and if I ever have issues with like where my variables are, it's just all in one file. So what you see a lot when people are using SASS is they have a file for variables, a file for mixins, a file for functions, and like files for their for the styling for their components. So notice that when I go here, where's my variables, and change this to what's it called? And it says sky blue. Oh, there it is. Sky blue. So my, let's see, component text color and my paragraph color are gonna turn sky blue. Color.
Does it matter that there's an underscore on the file but not in your import?
It shouldn't matter. What's not matter? Yeah. I'm gonna do it with the prefix. guess you do need a prefix. So when you're using import, no, I don't know. At work, I guess they do something different, but yeah. So you need the, you don't need the underscore, but you need the prefix. Okay, cool. And of course, when using partials, they're useful in grouping related SASS and keeping the code structured and organized. All right. Any questions about partials? Yes.
So, and if it was, you know, more larger, the main SASS file,
Yeah.
it'd be, in the variable, it'd be like component color 1 or component color, you would name the variables, or how would you, once it gets really big, how do you?
If my variables file or my main file?
Both.
Okay.
So all the components, styling of all the components would go into that main SASS file?
Yeah. Well, in this case it does, but you'll see that there's gonna be a main, but then they'll import, let's say, something for buttons, like, and then that'll import all the styling for buttons,
Okay.
and then something for, I don't know, forms, and then that'll go import everything, all the styling for forms. That way you can keep all your CSS in like separate, like self-contained files, and then that enables like a team to work on it. So it could be like, you work on the button styling, and then you work on the form styling, and then that way people won't like overlap. That's a good question. All right, cool. So moving on. Mixins. Mixins are really useful. So they're able to group chunks of usable SAS code, and it's declared with a mixin, that at sign for mixin, and you can use them in your code with that at includes. And I'll do that. So file. So if I want to use a partial, and I wanted to call this partial mixins, what would be the file name? Mixins. But what do I start with?
Underscore.
Underscore. Awesome. And then mixins.
Do you do the underscore so it all comes to the top?
I don't know.
Just convention?
That's the way SAS that SAS knows that's a partial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
But it makes it easier when all that code is
Yeah.
it goes to the top at the end. That's one of the bonuses. So let's say I wanted to use a mixin, and let's call this say border. So border 1 pixel solid. So then in my main, how do I add a partial? Can anyone tell me what do I need to type?
Import mixins.
Import
Yes, that's great.
mixins CSS. Alright, awesome. So now to use a mixin, let's say I wanted to use it in this component. So what I would do is include, what's the name of the mixin? This is called order.
I have an unrelated question.
Yes.
Do you not have code collapse on this?
Code collapse.
Yeah, so like if you wanted to collapse component, oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Just don't have any, gotcha.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I was thinking, those CSS files can get kind of ginormous, it would really suck if you could collapse them.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
That gets to be a pain sometimes when you have like large files.
Word.
So, oh shoot, red's not a good color. Everything's red. Let's make this.
Oh.
Oh, you saw it.
I just now realized, I was like, what was wrong with it? Oh, yeah, no, yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'll show you what I did now.
only 1 pixel, so right, it's not seeing it.
Maybe I
make
can't
it
see
wider.
it. What's going on?
Or it's just not working.
So I have a border. I want my border through and see.
You had something that says at Nixon on that slide you just showed.
Oh, the at mixin? It
You
should,
have to declare, or is that
it should be right
something else?
here.
Oh, I see. Sorry. that's-
Cool. No problem. When you get stuck, you could just Google things. Mixin. Yeah, mixin. Yeah. What the heck? Oh wait.
There's no brackets on
Oh
board.
shoot, yeah.
Yeah.
The little things. There it goes.
There it
Yay!
is.
Awesome. So you could see that.
And you'd be able to reuse that border over and over.
Yes,
and over and
yes,
over.
exactly. So I know like borders are used a lot.
Yeah.
You would know. Yeah, so
No, that's really nice, especially for like branding consistency and things like that. Like
Yes.
Preset things.
yes, like SASS is really good with like themes. So with just a few changes of code, you could change the theme of your entire page. Like let's say, like with variables and mix-ins and partials, you could just change the color to this, and then it transforms from like let's say you're in Halloween, oranges and blacks, and then now it's Christmas, change it from oranges to blacks to reds and greens.
I feel like this is a really nice middle ground because like Bootstrap's great, but you don't have as much granular control over your styling.
Yeah,
Without like really digging in and like, breaking some stuff to make
Yeah.
it be what you want.
yeah,
So this is kind of cool.
yeah, exactly. So something like border is used a lot, and then there are other things that are used a lot, but it depends on like how you style. All right, so back to here. So with mix-ins, it allows us to reuse chunks of SASS and consolidate in these chunks in one location. So it's like something with border, you're able to consolidate in one location. If you want to add border to your buttons, to like your titles, and then you can use them for like font styling also. Let's say you can do a mix-in font, and you can call it font size, I don't know, 16 pixels, and you can use that anywhere. But you could also use like font, font, and you can use some sort of font family. And then so in your main, let's say font. Mixing font. Font. Okay, cool. Okay. Okay. The last topic I want to talk about is control flow logic. So let's go back to our border. Let's say we want the border to be light. This is too heavy. So let's say we want our border to be light. So we go to our mixin right here for border, and we add a variable, let's say type. So this is similar to functions in Python, JavaScript, or any other programming language. And we could add an if statement.
I was gonna say.
If border, oh wait, if type equals light, then our border could be, let's say, 4 pixels, solid, black. And then if type equals medium, border is 8 pixels, solid, black. And then we have our else statement.
Programming in CSS, that's crazy.
Right? It's kind of cool though, right?
Yeah, I don't know, what, is there, I mean, you got other stuff to show us, is there loops, for loops
There
and
is
stuff?
loops and stuff. I'm gonna, let's see how much time I got. Oh shoot.
Cool.
I know we started late. I'm trying to
I mean, I
get
wonder
through
how
this.
much of this takes out some of those little trivial JavaScript stuff that you know, like if you have just little things and you like, you can replicate it with CSS and not. I don't play around.
So then, wait, 4 pixels. Okay, so notice I put loop. Okay, so back to our mixing. So the type of border is dependent on what we put as a variable for our mixing. So I added light, and our border is 4 pixels solid black. But if, let's say, I don't put anything in here,
With 4 variable.
yeah, so I put this.
Someday, I'm sure someone's
So
looking at it.
then, what do you think our border is gonna be?
The last one that pulls forward.
Yeah, you're right. So in our mixin, if it's light, it's 4 pixels. If it's medium, how many pixels is it gonna be? 8 pixels, right? And if I put anything else in our type,
So if it doesn't match anything at all.
if it doesn't match anything, how many pixels is it gonna be? 1 pixel, right? So in our main, what did I put in? Just jargon, right? So then that's why it's 1 pixel solid black. Right? So that is, I mean, useful whenever you want like border, font, like any other CSS styling. What else is there? So I went over if and else if. Any questions about if and else if? So you can see like the flexibility you have with SASS whenever you're styling a web page. So
Would you use something like that for like media query or no?
for media queries?
Like if
Oh
screen
yeah,
size
yeah.
else, I'm just curious if that's.
Yeah. So you, let's say if you pass it in as a variable for your media query, let's say like this is, I don't know, this is size, something like size,
Mm-hmm.
and then you could do if type, if size equals like large,
Mm-hmm.
then you could add like a media query here, media screen. You could add that in there, and then that, and you could do that. You could implement media queries that way. So the last thing I wanted to go over is the for loop. So let me do this actually here. So okay, so write a for loop real quick. this quick for loop real fast and then explain what it does. Oh, $. Okay, that. This real quick. Just call that one.
Do you have a lore Ipsum in your, is it coded in ES?
Hmm?
Do you have that, the lore Ipsum as like a fill-in?
Yeah. It comes with, on mine it came with Visual
Is it in there?
this
I
code.
just, that's fine.
Yeah, but like I know for some people like they don't have that. I was like, well, I guess
It's gotta
everyone.
be it's
Maybe it's
extension
it came with
somewhere.
a plugin that I installed.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so let's call this and let's see. I want to make sure it works before I start explaining. Okay, cool. So, all right. So with SASS, you could also use for loops. So in this case, I made it a for loop by doing that @ symbol and for. And then I declare my variable. In this case, I declared it as I. And I want it to go from 1 through 3. So you write it in this fashion.
Ugh.
And then,
You gotta write through.
I know.
That's ugly, man. That reminds me of like, I don't know, that's worse than like Visual Basic when you have to do then with the.
Oh yeah, that's
God,
that's one of the things when I saw that. It's
Man,
like,
who wrote the code for that? I was like, hey,
That's-
here's how we should do our for loops. Put
Like-
through in the
I don't
middle.
know, I think
That's
that
a lot of
that's
text
why
for
it's
a
not-
yeah.
Like I can forgive the from part, but
The
Jesus.
through. It's like so much.
Really?
That's a long word.
Hey, you could have put two or I don't know anything. Jeez.
Yeah. Or like
Alright.
even like a dash sign or something. I don't
Something.
know. Or like a I don't know.
Anything other than a what is that? An 8-character word, 7-character word?
He acts as if he actually types anything out and doesn't just tab through
Yeah,
it
I know.
anyway.
Well, you know.
So
Use it as
for
I was
this
just
case-
lazy. I don't know if you know that.
So for this case, the for loop, I'm having it look at the F class, and I'm using string interpolate. I can't say it right now. String. I converted this
Interpolation.
variable to a string, and then so it looks for F dash whatever my variable I is. So for the first iteration, it'll be the class F1, and then I'm setting the font size to whatever 10 pixels times whatever the variable is at that moment. So for the first iteration, the font size is what?
10,
10. Awesome. And then
20, and then 30.
yeah. So you could so it kind of does like F1
Man, that's crazy. Leaving you mad.
and then font size
That's wild. Let's see
at
that.
10 pixels. So essentially, this is what it builds. Is it 20? So essentially, this is what it does. So all this code is equal to this code. So you can see how like this is more condensed, and you don't have to write all of this out.
Yeah.
And whenever you need to change it, you don't have to change each one. You can just go right here. Oh, instead of 10 pixels, I want to start at 8 pixels instead. So then I could delete that.
Yeah.
And then if I refresh this, yeah, I changed 3 paragraphs of text with just one simple change. So yeah, any questions about this for loop?
No?
No. Cool. So what's really cool is I've seen someone build like a grid system using this kind of like this way of creating of using a for loop. So they would do like something like that, and then like
A
they
nested
change this to
for
like
loop.
width or something like
They
that.
did like in the nested to the rows and columns.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
pretty. I saw that and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So it's like it's all written like 5 lines, the whole grid system, like five or 8 lines of code. It's like, whoa, that's pretty cool. So the last thing I want to leave you guys with is there's a lot more things you could do with SASS. So one of the things you could do is functions. You can also use each, which is similar to like the for loop, but
For
instead
each,
it uses
iterate over a collection.
yeah. It iterates over a collection, and then map.get. It's kind of like mapping. It's almost like each, I would say. You could also use a popular type of architecture for SASS is the 7-in-1 architecture. I know I talked about like variables and mixins, but they also have let's see what I read about. It's like 7. I think it was like 7 partials to kind of like architecture SASS. So like you have a file for variables, or a file for mixins, and files for your other types of SASS functionality. So that's it. I push you guys to start using SASS, look more into SASS, because if you do, it makes you a really valuable candidate for like anyone's company. So yeah, that's it.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah. Cool. All right, thank you guys.
So what's all this complaining we're doing with us?
Complaining about what?